everybody. My name is Meredith Martin Moats, and this is, I think, our fourth podcast in this series. We're calling this podcast series Rhizomes, a Community of Learners podcast. I'm the executive director of the River Valley Adult Learning Alliance. You will probably recognize our name as the Literacy Council, but we have changed our name several years ago to reflect that we do more than just literacy. We help people with all kinds of learning goals that they might have as an adult, anything from studying for the GED to learning English to preparing for workforce readiness. Family literacy really is kind of all over the map. If you have a learning goal, we'll try to help you. Also digital literacy, that's something we've really been focusing on a lot lately. But the idea with this podcast, we were invited to do this podcast by Obi, and the idea is that I have guests on that are somehow affiliated either with our work at RVALA or sort of community learning in general, because I really want us to explore what it means to learn in community, and that people are always learning, that they never stop learning. I think that we have this misconception in our society that like you go to school from kindergarten to 12th grade and then maybe you go on to college or trade school, maybe you don't, but that's where you learn, is in these sort of like classroom settings. I think that's a really big misconception, and I think it really does a disservice to us as a population to not understand that learning is just something that happens every minute of every day. We never stop learning. Like Tal was just talking about how he was learning lighting. And I'm like, yes, exactly. Like we're all always learning. And I think if we're unafraid to say that, if we're unafraid to talk about how we're always learning, it opens up all kinds of opportunities for us. So that's a little bit of background. If you don't know about rhizomes, I'm going to ask Danielle here in a minute if she knows about rhizomes. It's a kind of nerdy plant metaphor, but I think it works really well because a rhizome is a kind of root that grows underneath the ground. So a lot of the work is invisible, but it will quickly sort of take root and go everywhere. Bermuda grass grows by rhizomes, and you can't get rid of Bermuda grass. But so does yarrow and lots of other things. And it's sort of a technique of growing underground and then sort of being very powerful. You can't really break it. So anyway, today I've got Danielle Hausnick. She's the director of Main Street Russellville. I've known her forever because she actually predated. She was on the board that hired me at RVALA's like 5 years ago. And in fact, I think you were the one that sent me the application. Like you were the one that was like, hey, can you share this? Can you, and I was like, yes, and I will apply for it. So that was a long time ago. So we're going to kind of get into some of the things that Danielle sees in the community in terms of what we need, the kind of learning connections that maybe we need more of, and how Russellville may be sometimes not knowing about all these opportunities for continued learning and connections, and what we can do about that. All right, so Danielle, I'm going to ask you first. Did you know the word rhizomes before this podcast?
I've heard it. It kind of was taking me back to like 8th grade science class.
Yes.
And I think I knew it was a type of root, but I didn't know much beyond that.
Yeah, when I first decided that we would name it something besides just Community of Learners, and I picked that, and I was like, that's so nerdy, and then I was like, whatever.
I love it.
Okay, so you're the director of Main Street Russellville. A lot of people watching are probably going to know what that is. But if you don't, like if you're watching and you're like, what is that exactly? Or I've heard of it, but I don't really know. Can you give us a brief description of what that is?
Absolutely. So a lot of people know us as the downtown people. We are classified as a downtown revitalization organization. But what does that really mean? And basically what I say is we do community and economic development. So something to keep in mind is that even though we celebrate the place that downtown is, and we have events downtown, and we're, caretakers of downtown basically, what we do affects the entire community. Like I'd like to point out to people that just because an event happens downtown, the effects are felt everywhere. We have people from all over the community that come to the events. We have people from outside of our community, and so really it's kind of a lot of that I love the title because it goes with that so much. I feel like the idea of roots and being connected and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, it is like kind of, your events are kind of like rhizomes, because it's like you have the event, but then the after effects sprawl out, and because I'm always hearing people talk about who they met at Art Walk, or who, like all of these connections. So speaking of, what are some of your more popular events, and what are some coming up?
all right, so Art Walk, you mentioned, that happens 4 times a year, and it is probably one of the most well-known events that we have. And it's taken a lot of different forms over the years. I think the first art walks that I don't even think I lived here when the first art walks started happening. And those might have been a little bit more fine-tuned to focus on fine arts. But, we see a lot of different things happening in the art world. And, I mean, you can broadly define it: culinary arts, music arts, literary arts. I mean, there's just a lot of different kind of art. And really the purpose of that event is to promote art, to expose people to art. One of the things I love is making it accessible and affordable. So we don't charge artists to participate in the art walk. We do limit it to artists, like we'll have a lot of nonprofits or other organizations that are like, hey, can I set up an art walk? And we're like, we're trying to keep it just art related. But one of the things that I love about Art Walk is first of all, you see everybody in town. I mean, really, you see your mailman, your pediatrician, like your neighbor. I see neighbors that live, a house or 2 away from me. And I'm like, I never see you when I'm at home, but I see you here. But also the differing ages. So I have 2 teenage daughters, and their friends will ask them, like, when's the next art walk? And I love it because their friends will come and they'll hang out, and I know where they're at. Like, they're in a safe place. They can walk around. My girls love to buy jewelry, so they always come home with several pairs of earrings that someone has made, and that's always a fun thing. So art walks, that is a very popular one. The next one is coming up very soon on June 6th. So they actually happen quarterly. So it's the first Friday of March, June, and September. Excuse me. We actually do change it for December. We typically will do the second Friday in December. And the reason we do that is because of other events happening, like the Christmas parade. So the first Thursday in December is the Russellville Christmas parade. Right. And then the Dardanelle Christmas parade is usually the day after. And, sometimes there's other things going on for the holidays. So we do try to, spread it out a little bit. But that one is always really big. We have a fireworks show, and it's very well attended, and it's a lot of fun. Nice. We've had people propose at art walks, and I love that so much. But yes, art walks are one of my favorites, very well known. We also have our Juneteenth event coming up, which is one of our newer events. This will be, I think, the 4th or 5th year for it. And I am very, very proud of that event. I've actually gone to the National Main Street Conference and presented about our event. And it all started whenever somebody came to me and said, hey, do we ever do a Juneteenth downtown? And I'm like, no, there's already one that happens. And they were like, well, I think that happens because nobody else does anything. And that was a learning experience for me. I did not know that. I had heard of Juneteenth, but I didn't understand the significance. So that was a really neat event for me to learn about. And I kind of take a back seat. And Tarshawn Whitehead, who is on my board of directors, he's amazing, and it's really his baby. But I just love that because, he's reached out in the community and found others that, are passionate about it, and they do a lot of the work, and I kind of just provide the support. And again, I've learned so much with that event. We've put in place an Arkansas River Valley Black Hall of Fame. Yeah. And talk about learning. I have learned about so many people in this community, some of them that have passed, unfortunately, but the effects that they've had on this community. And so that has, again, been a super learning experience for me. And it's really neat to see those people, as Tarshawn puts it, see them get their flowers, and see their families come out. So that's a really, really fun one. And Rodney Block is our entertainment. And if you've not seen that man live, you're not doing life right. Like, he's so amazing. He gets the crowd going. He's so good. So that's coming up this year. We'll do it on June 13th. And then finally in June, our last event is our first summer concert.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. We do 3 summer concerts, and that's probably another one of my favorites, just because I love live music, and I love being able to bring it to people. We kind of are in between bigger cities that have venues, and we don't really have a whole lot of places here for people to enjoy live music. I mean, we do have some, but I'm just always happy to be able to add to that and the atmosphere, and so
And
yeah.
it's outside, which is so nice, and kids can feel welcome. I love
Absolutely.
when, you said Rodney Block's coming back this year?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be there. I went last year and it was great. And I love that, different kids of different ages, because it's outside, so they can kind of go off and do their own thing and play if they want, or they can sit and listen and dance and whatever. And it gives you so many options of ways to take part, which I really appreciate as a mom of teens and preteens.
Absolutely. Well, and if you think about it, even just to go to like the movies these days, I mean, that's expensive.
Yes.
And so if we can provide somewhere for families to go for free in a safe place, we love when people come downtown and they grab something to eat at one of our restaurants beforehand.
Right.
But you can bring your own snacks if you want. You can bring your own drinks. So it can be very affordable, but also just a good way to connect with other people in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when we first moved back here from Little Rock, like I'd grown up in Dardanelle, but hadn't lived here for a while. And I think it was like the first or second weekend we were here, Art Walk was happening. And so we had just left Little Rock. My kids were used to living in Little Rock, and we'd moved out to the country on a dirt road. And so, everybody was like a little culture shock or whatever. Not so much for me, but for them, because they had always grown up in Little Rock. And I remember we went to Art Walk, and they just loved it. Like, it was really fun for them. And yeah, it's great. And I love the Juneteenth event. And and I think that you bring up such a good point around, this opportunity to educate yourself, and as a leader at Main Street, to take a back seat when you need to take a back seat and say, hey, here's some resources. Let's make this, what the community needs. I think that's really powerful. That's one of the things I think a lot about when I think about what we need as community organizations, is I think sometimes we're taught to always step up and take the lead, but there's a real time to step back and to know when to step up and to know the difference. And that, that takes a level of community appreciation and understanding to know.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it is a good point, because really, when you think about it, there are so many people in this community that are leaders, and maybe they are, leaders in their own way. They might not be the people that you think of as being leaders, but they really are. Yeah. And, for me, it would have been a missed opportunity for myself and the entire community if I had not realized that was a time for me to step back.
Right.
One of my favorite quotes about leadership is that it's not about the role, it's about the goal. And I have no idea who said that, but I absolutely love it, because, we're all working towards similar causes. I mean, really, when you look at nonprofits and community organizations, most of us are just trying to make this a better place to live. Yeah. In one way or another, that's what we're trying to do. For somebody, we're trying to make it a better place. And so why wouldn't we work together toward that goal?
Yeah, I love that. I hadn't intended to say this, but you triggered a memory. One of my favorite goals about leadership is from Ella Baker, civil rights activist, but is by her. But she said the job of a leader is to make more leaders.
Absolutely.
And I really love that sort of, because again, everybody has the capacity to do something in their community, and I think it's our job to encourage and support that, and to know when to step up and to know when to step back and be like, hey, you got this. Right. I'm back here supporting you, whatever. Right. So that kind of gets a little bit into this broader theme that we're talking about today, which is, where we might be missing some connections. One of the things that when people ask me what we do at RVALA, that I try to articulate is, because a lot of people are like, well, okay, so you teach people to read. Yes, because to be very clear, there is about a 30% population in Yale County. It's a little bit lower in Polk County, that struggle with what we would call level 1 reading, which level 1 reading is essentially like 3rd grade and under. So that means that a person would have a hard time understanding a court order or a letter from the bank or something that got sent home from school. So pretty big, the kind of stuff that you really need to understand to navigate life. It also leaves you and your family incredibly vulnerable to scams, to not so great people in the world who might like to take advantage of you because your literacy, level is not where it should be. So, but also I think in the community, what we're really trying to do is to really broaden this idea of like what literacy is, and how we're all in a state of learning. Like I say all the time, like I have a master's degree, but there's not a single day that I don't go to work and I have to teach myself something new or call somebody else and be like, I don't know what's going on. Can you please help me? And I think that we're taught as a society to not show that vulnerability, but I personally feel like some of the most innovative thinkers in the world are the people who are willing to be like, I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to go to someone who does know, and I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to learn. And it takes a lot of vulnerability, but also a lot of bravery to do that. So we're really trying to explore, like, how can we meet people where they are, whatever kind of learning they have. You might struggle with literacy, but you might be like a genius tech person. I mean, my grandfather was illiterate, but nobody could work with horses like my grandpa could work with horses. So I think that we want to kind of rethink, what does it mean to, what does it mean? What does literacy mean? And I guess the big thing I like to think about is literacy being not just reading words on a page, but being able to take in information, process that information, and then do something with it. And so that's a long way to say. I feel like even though you do Main Street and, I'm the director of RVLA, we have a lot of similar kind of overlap. And so you have been on the board, like I said, at RVALA since before I got here. And so I'm really curious about what you see as some of the skills that people need in this community. Like, where do you see some of the gaps in what Russellville and Pope and Yale counties in general need in terms of literacy education broadly defined?
Yeah. Financial literacy is a big one. Like you mentioned, a letter from the bank. That's something that I feel like everybody can benefit from, is better financial literacy. Yes. But just in general, there are things that some of us do on a daily basis that we kind of take for granted. For instance, I work with a lot of small businesses, and when it comes to things like getting a business permit or getting a permit to put a sign on your building, sometimes the people who handle that, they're so used to it that it's that whole idea that you have to like take yourself out of the equation and just go, wait a minute, if I was doing this for the first time, what would I need to know? And so, I mean, there's things like that where we just have to take ourselves outside of the situation and say, okay, imagine I'm an alien from another planet. What would I, how would I guide this person, But I think that there's a lot of things that could be streamlined. We have a lot of resources in this area. We really, really do. And, like if you look at the RVALA sign, I mean, I am willing to bet that a lot of people aren't familiar with some of the organizations that are on there, like Engage Arkansas or AmeriCorps. People may not know what those are. Right. And again, like they're out there. Sometimes people don't know what they need or that they can get it, So it goes back to that idea of communication and connections. which goes back to the title of the podcast and the roots.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, well, and you bringing up the, because you work with small business owners, and one of the things that we've seen a lot at RVALA, we've worked with a few people. If she's listening, shout out Leslie, is one of the people who's taught me a lot about what learners need when, they're entrepreneurs. And the Small Business Center at Tech, of course, has been huge.
Absolutely.
Huge in helping people. And, we've had experience helping, especially English language learners, gain the skills that they need to, because entrepreneurship is I think a gift for some people. It's also a skill. But if you're an English language learner, it's also a whole new vocabulary that people don't just use in everyday conversation. People don't, just talk about collateral or,
right.
And those are words you have to learn and make sense of. But I really think that when I go to literacy conferences and stuff, we talk a lot about, what are the skills that people need to improve workforce. And one of the things I feel like I observe in this community is we have a lot of entrepreneurs in this community. Like more so than I feel like I've seen in some other places. And part of it, I think, is sort of like weird, because part of it, I think, is if you look at the data for this area, our unemployment rate isn't super high. What is high is our what they call underemployment, which means that people are often working 2 to 3 jobs to make sort of a living wage, and they may still also need assistance for various things. So if you were to just pull up our data for this area and be like, unemployment is low,
right?
Sure. I mean, there's also high employment in certain sectors. I don't want to say it's like low across the board, but if you just look at that 1% without any sort of information around it, you might be like, but it's underemployment. It's like lack of a job that will pay you a living wage, or lack of a job that will provide you stability. And so I think that has led to a really entrepreneurial spirit in this community, where people are like, well, this isn't going to cut it, so I got to come up with some other ideas. And I think that, on the one hand, we should pay a living wage. Like, I don't know if I can say that on air, but I'm going to. That should be a thing. But the other thing is, I think we can look at this as a strength in our community, that people have learned to take, all these random skills that they have and turn it into something to feed their families. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about, what you see as the small business spirit in this community, because you're on the front lines of that.
I am on the front lines, and even more so recently. So I think it's pretty cool. The AEDC, Arkansas Economic Development Commission, they have invested in entrepreneurs. And so there's a program right now called 75 Strong, and I am lucky enough to be a part of that program. And it's going to take about 2 years, but basically we are getting education. There's, I think, 60 of us, between 60 and 70 of us from all over Arkansas. And we are getting an education from the International Economic Development Council. And at the end of the program, the goal is that we take a test to get a certification. I think it's the EDP, which I think is Entrepreneurial Development Certification. It's newer. I mean, there's only there's less than 100 in the entire country. So if all of us pass the test, and we will, we will, close to double that. And to my knowledge, no other state is doing any program like this. So, at our classes that we had recently, I had somebody from the AEDC sitting at my table, and I was like, this is a significant investment in Arkansas, and thank you. Yeah. Because, we are full of so much entrepreneurial spirit. Small businesses. Now, the SBA defines it as businesses with less than 500 employees. So
that's a big.
Yeah, right. I mean, because around here, it's like some of these are just single people running a business.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, and that's what's interesting about it too, is that there's a lot of different, sizes. Not all small businesses are the same, and that's something that, again, lifelong learning. I've learned. I mean, we refer to things as small businesses in our downtown But honestly, a lot of those businesses are what they call micro enterprises.
Okay.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So a micro enterprise is a very small business,
Okay.
basically. So think 1 or 2 people.
Okay. That's
And it is often driven by passion over profit. So doesn't mean that they don't want to make a profit.
Right.
But, it's driven by something that someone is passionate about. So, for example, if you look at our downtown, we have an independent bookstore, which is, those are dying out. There's not that many of them left. And, it's a project of passion for dog-eared books to exist. And, the interesting thing about micro enterprises is that they have a lot of influence on a place.
Yes.
So you say underemployed. A few years ago, 8 years ago, maybe longer than I care to admit, I was underemployed. I, was downsized from my remote work position, and I had a master's degree. I still have a master's degree, but I say that like I had it and it went away. I still have it. And I mean, again, I was like, okay. After looking for something that I wanted to do, I was like, all right, I got to do something.
Right.
And so I was lucky enough that I worked at the downtown bookstore, Dog Ear Books. I worked there part-time. I was a substitute teacher for Russellville schools. And I was also an adjunct at UACCM and at Arkansas Tech University. So I literally had 4 different jobs at the same time. And talk about learning. I learned so much. And I really loved the teaching part of it. But what ended up pulling me in was the downtown. So, it has a lot of bearing. These micro enterprises have a lot of bearing on the place that we create. And that's another reason that they're important and that we invest in them. So I was lucky enough to have that opportunity, and that's when I started to learn about downtown. And I'm like, okay, this is, when my position right now came open, I was like, I can do this. Like, this is, and even things like a nonprofit. I mean, that working for a nonprofit, you're not making a ton of money, but you're passionate. So we're almost like micro enterprises in that way, right?
Yeah.
You're passionate about what you do.
Right.
And, there are so many other benefits to it as well. So, there is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm really glad that have the opportunity right now to learn more because, again, I'm learning there's so many resources.
Right.
And we just, people think, well, for example, you said the ASB TDC, which it stands for Arkansas Small Business Technology and Development Center. A lot of people don't know what that is. And we, again, are lucky enough to have one of the locations in our city. They're housed over at Arkansas Tech University. A lot of people don't know they're there. They don't know what they do. They don't know that it's free and that it's open to the entire community. They also might not realize that even if you start a business with them, you can always go back and get help. They have access to even more resources and data and things like that. So, it's just things that are already in existence that we're not aware of, and we need to bring that to everyone, bring it to the community so that they can make the most of their entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was at the state conference for literacy councils the other day, and there was a woman who came from Texas to talk to us about, a lot of stuff, but around how to tell our stories better. It was part of what it was about. But she's from Texas, and she'd done all this research on Arkansas to kind of see, like, well, what am I seeing out there? One of the things she mentioned was the ATU Small Business Center, and I was like, yes. But it is such a great resource, and they'll, from what I've heard, because we've worked with multiple people who've worked with them, they stay with you. They will support you as long as you show up. Like, they're going to support you. I think that's so important.
One of the other things that, I've learned about entrepreneurs is they are what they call sticky. So, somebody works with the ASB TDC, there's a good, a better chance that they're going to stick around, that they're going to stay in the community because they have that resource. And if you think about, just people that are entrepreneurs, could they have gone somewhere else and started a business? Could they have started an independent bookstore in a bigger city? Yeah, probably. But they did it here because they're invested in this place and in in this community, and that is really important. And that is another reason why you see, when you see the back of T-shirts for Little League or whatever it might be, and you see who the sponsors are, I mean, they're mostly our local businesses. Yeah. Every once in a while, you'll see a big heavy hitter, but a lot of them are local, and those are the people that invest. I mean, I could quote all kinds of statistics about, the power of spending your money locally and with entrepreneurs. But that's kind of boring. So just know that it's a good thing.
No, I think you bring up such a good point, like that investment, that spirit of like investing, because it's like one of the things is we do receive some donations to the organization. If you're somebody who wants to donate, but please get in touch with me. But a lot of times it's not big donors. It's people who they give $20, but that might be like a huge chunk of their payment, their pay that week. So it's like people really want to invest in something that they see as creating that rhizome effect, that how do we work together? One of the things we talked about at the beginning, and we can kind of close out on talking about this, is we were mentioning with when Tal was in here as well, but like it does seem like sometimes people don't know what some of the connections are that they might could get involved in. And, like we're saying, on the one hand, we have this struggle around, there's underemployment, but that's led to this, I like to think of it as scrappiness, kind of scrappy spirit that people have, like, I'm going to put all these random things together and make it work. But we do have all these resources, but not everybody knows about them. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about it, Juneteenth, and that shows such an example. I think one of the reasons sometimes people don't know about opportunities here is we're not always being strategic around how we partner, like because egos get in the way. People want to do like, well, my organization is doing this. I love that you modeled kind of like, hey, I'm going to play a supporting role, know? Or also I think there's a question around, just capacity. I know a lot of people will talk to me like, well, we didn't know you do all these things. And it's like, I don't have any more hours in the day to go out and talk more about it. Like we're struggling just to keep the basic needs afloat. Which is why I love that they ask us to do this podcast, because I come over here for an hour and people do get to know more about what we're doing. And it doesn't require me spending 8 hours like in the community when I really need to spend 8 hours getting curriculum for the students or figuring out how we're going to pay a stipend for mileage or, any of those like kind of boring behind the scenes. But that's a long-winded way to say, I'm really curious what you see as how we could do as a community a better job about knowing what some of those resources are, and how can we as community workers, whether it's the new term I learned, micro enterprise, I love it, whether it's micro enterprises or small businesses or nonprofits or community leaders that like preachers, teachers, people who are out there in the public sphere a lot, how can we do a better job of helping weave these connections together?
I think a big part of it is listening. Not as much talking and more listening. And I'm a person who talks a lot. But a good example is whenever I shut up and I listened about Juneteenth, that's when I learned. And I think that, again, just today, we're talking about all these resources and we've not named every single one, but, again, like look at the sign. There are several different logos there. Those are resources. But if you just listen to people, I think sometimes there is, and this is just a human nature. I think that there is an idea about ego or who should do what or who shouldn't do what. And, I think we just have to put that aside because, again, it's about the goal, not about the role. So, we struggle with that a lot at Main Street because, again, we're the downtown people or the event planners. And what people don't know is that behind the scenes, we are doing things like learning about entrepreneurship and learning about how we can make, a difference in the community and in the local economy. I mean, economic vitality is one of the pillars that we work on, and, grants. That's another thing. People just like, well, where does this money come from? And I know you are the grant queen. I'm nowhere near as good at grants as you are, but those are competitive, and it takes time to really get yourself in a place where you can successfully apply for those things. And again, even after you get a grant, you've got to, document and report and all those sorts of things. So
much work.
Yes, absolutely. It is not free money. It is not free money.
No.
It comes with all sorts of strings, which by all means it should, because, the people putting that money out there want to make sure it's going to the right place and spent the right way.
Right.
But yeah, really, I think that if we just listen to each other and keep an open mind, that's really what's important. Because again, there's probably somebody in this community that has encountered just about any issue that you can think of. And, it's just, sometimes it's connecting, but again, listening. Don't think that just because somebody doesn't have a degree or doesn't have a certain type of education or, you don't know what they know. And so just be quiet and listen sometimes. And then other times you're going to be the one doing the talking. But I think learning, a lot of that happens through listening.
I love that. And I'll close with this, but it reminds me of like one of the things that I see a lot in my job is like the amount of bravery it takes for someone to show up and say, I want to learn English. I'm a Spanish learner right now, and I know, like, I thought I understood, but now that I'm actually in situations where I'm having to use my Spanish and I do it wrong, the level of vulnerability that can feel, and we see people every day who are just like, hey, I want to learn. Or we get a phone call, someone who's like, hey, I never really learned how to read, and now I'm raising my child and I want her to have different opportunities. So, the kind of like bravery and vulnerability it takes for somebody to say, hey, I need some support. If we had that across the community, if we had leaders who did that every day, who were like, I don't actually have any idea how to do this, let me talk to some people who do. I think, it would build those connections, because like you said, we all have these skill sets that can be useful, and we all need to learn when to listen to other people's skill sets and to sit with that, like, hey, I don't know, but I want to learn.
Well, and I think a lot of times that, we feel like, oh, you're an executive director, you must know everything.
Right.
And it's like, no, but you're going to know a lot more if you listen and you learn. And, really in this world, let's think about it. Who knows how to do everything? Nobody. So you're not any better or worse than anybody else just because you don't know something.
Exactly.
What makes you better is listening to someone else and learning from it. That's my opinion.
I love that. Yes. Listen. Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. This was wonderful. And we'll be back, I think, in 2 weeks. Suliana Hurtado is going to come and talk to us about behind the scenes at an ESL classroom, as well as our beginning Spanish classes. So I want to put a plug for that. We do have beginning Spanish classes starting with Suliana, not this Friday, but the following Friday. They're free. We don't get any money from the state to do any of our Spanish classes. We just do it because we have so many requests for it. Going back to entrepreneurship, a lot of people want to at least understand some basic Spanish. So they're free. We do take donations for them, but they're free. So that's something we have coming up. And we have regular learning. We always need tutors. So if any of this inspired you today, please get in touch with us or get in touch with Danielle if you want to volunteer for events. There is something for you to do any day in this community. Don't sit and think you can't make a difference, because you absolutely can. just get in touch with us, and we'll be like, here's a list. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and thanks to River Valley Town Square for letting us do this, and have a good day.